The following presentation is brought to you by Rise to the Rescue, supporting Joe Glean, Prospective Delegate for Virginia's 44th House District.
There used to be an old phrase that I would frequently circulate among my colleagues. When in doubt, vote Republican. In fact, many conservatives still faithfully observe this very type of catch-all philosophy. After all, no matter how far off the mark the Republican candidate seemed to stand, we knew from years of precedents that the Democrat was sure to have adopted a position that was quite predictably that much further from the mark. But among those politicians running for office over the past few decades, I have come to realize that there is, in fact, something worse than a Democrat candidate who wears his own menacing face. Of course, I'm referring to those charlatan candidates out there who wear the facade of a Republican, but who make a mockery of our nation's Republican principles. And having given the subject quite a lot of thought over these past few election cycles, I have come to regret all those years of succumbing to that impulse of voting for the Republican label, ushering folks into office such as Senator John Warner and Congressman Tom Davis. Such men were hardly worthy of our political support, and yet so many of us went ahead and supported their campaigns anyway, simply because they ran as Republicans. But in truth, the stench of moral neglect and corporate socialism was so strong on candidates such as these that even as we cast those votes, we couldn't help but hold our noses in disgust. Friends, we can no longer afford to keep doing this. The problem becomes most evident when we are faced with the type of Republican who seems at first glance to be the perfect candidate in every way. As we take a closer look, however, we discover the truth, that the would-be hero has actually adopted a sort of panderish political strategy which causes him to deliberately avoid taking a bold stand against those great moral injustices of our day. Topping that list is the continued assault against those in the womb and the continual encroachment of same-sex marriage. The media, of course, would identify such a person as a moderate Republican, as if to suggest that this somehow constitutes a balanced position. But as we resolve to throw our support behind such candidates, we actually begin to legitimize what once seemed to be a very empty accusation, that Republicans care only about their own money, their own jobs, and their own liberty, and that they don't seem to have any genuine concern or compassion for anyone else. By following the Democrats in these doctrines of secular humanism and moral relativism, Republicans are, in essence, becoming the very thing that was depicted in that old stereotype. This brings us to the nomination of John Barsa, which was officially announced earlier today. For all I know, Mr. Barsa might be a pretty swell individual, and this is not to speak bad of him personally. But the problem, once again, is that the Republicans have nominated someone who apparently refuses to take a stand on the issues that matter most to the future of our country and the future of the Commonwealth of Virginia. His campaign announcement speaks of economic issues, pro-business proposals, and transportation initiatives, but I'm afraid that nothing he says really gets to the heart of the matter. Clearly, we cannot trust partisan politicians to make the right decision when it comes to protecting the welfare of our women and children. How, then, can we trust them to balance a budget? We cannot trust the politicians to defend our religious liberty in the face of those forces that wish to impose gay marriage. How, then, can we trust them to save the economy? Barsa speaks of a desire to serve the community, but not even this is consistent with the requirements of the office. To be certain, The oath of office expressly requires that our elected delegates promise to defend and protect the Constitution. Nothing else should ever be placed ahead of this requirement. What this means is that when an aspiring politician postures himself in a way that indicates an intention to neglect our moral sovereignty, he is in essence indicating the intention to neglect the Constitution, the intention of doing a disservice to his community, and the intention of treating America's founding principles with utter contempt. Show me the example of any proposed economic solution that would compromise the freedoms that we enjoy under the Constitution, and in that same example, I will show you a solution that is inherently flawed. By continuing to nominate candidates such as John Barsa, who claim to be conservative on some issues, but who are notably weak on the most important issues, the Republican Party has, in effect, abandoned the platform of Ronald Reagan, and with it, all of those principles that had once made it great. Perhaps the most disturbing element of Barsa's campaign announcement is where he says that working together across party lines is critical to getting things done. As I see it, this is just a polite way of saying that he intends to follow the lead of politicians like Senator John Warner and Congressman Tom Davis, compromising at every turn, betraying public trust, and abandoning Republican principle. Perhaps this is why he makes no mention of the problem of illegal immigration, voter fraud, or federal encroachment. He speaks of education, but he makes no mention of defending the right to provide our children with a decent private education at home. My candidacy, on the other hand, represents an opportunity for those of faith, whether they happen to be Republican or Democrat, whether they happen to be Catholic, evangelical, Jewish, or otherwise, to vote with a clear conscience. Only when free America unites will we rid ourselves of politicians and aspiring politicians such as these. After all, we know that the Constitution can only work if the individuals who we allow to man the posts under the Constitution have the necessary character, vision, understanding, and moral courage to make it work. This is why I'm asking for the support of Democrats and Republicans alike. As I see it, both parties have been complicit in the betrayal of our moral sovereignty. What is required at this point is that we look past whatever comfortable affiliation we have traditionally held with the political parties, and instead focus on the role that Almighty God would have us to play in these troubling times. On Election Day 2011, I propose that we set aside whatever imaginary obligations that we feel we owe to the political parties, and for once in our lives, simply vote our conscience. For the sake of all that is good, decent, and proper, and for the enduring love of God and country. An untold measure of moral influence is there for us to express and affirm at the ballot box. If ordinary citizens would simply take a stand and exert some of that influence, abortion, gay marriage, religious oppression, and other state-imposed initiatives might be kept in their proper dominion and restrained from encroaching upon the free people of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Remember, the best way to improve public policy is to vote only for those sturdy individuals who truly represent you. Where I differ from the other two candidates is that I'm not a politician, or even an aspiring politician for that matter. At most, I would simply consider myself an aspiring statesman. My day job is nothing more glamorous than working in an old, dusty warehouse, passing out tools and supplies to technicians and contractors. But I believe that ordinary people should not be excluded from politics. As I understand it, there's actually a lobbying group out there that says unless you're a politically trained lawyer, or unless you know all the tricks and all the committee rules that are used to manipulate the process, then you have no business in politics. However, I would point out that the reason we're in the mess we're in is because ordinary people have come to believe this lie, that it's not our place to participate in the political process. As I see it, there is only one way to beat back the political parties. Free America must unite. And until that day, may God help us.